All right, good morning everyone, and welcome to the International Programs webinar on the use of unmanned aircraft systems by utilities. My name is Jessica McDonald. I'm a manager with the International Program, and it's truly my pleasure to host this webinar on this very important topic for the electric power industry. So before I introduce our esteemed presenters today, I wanted to quickly cover some housekeeping items first and give a brief overview of EEI and the international programs. So firstly, some housekeeping items for webinars. If you want to listen in, please dial in. You can go to the Meeting Info tab at the top of your screen, go to Connect to Audio, and you have two options. You can call in and use the global numbers presented for your country, or you can have WebEx call you. And you will be muted when you enter the line, so if you have any issues or any questions, please use the chat feature. And just for your awareness, this webinar will be recorded, and a recording will be shared on the EEI International YouTube channel. All right, so to begin, I'll give a brief overview of the Edison Electric Institute. EEI for short. EEI is the association that represents all U.S. investor-owned electric companies. Organized in 1933, EEI provides public policy leadership, strategic business intelligence, and essential conferences and forums to members and other stakeholders. And in addition to the U.S. members, EEI has over 65 international electric companies with operations spanning across more than 90 countries. And you can see here on this map a brief high-level representation of our member companies. You can see that we have companies across all regions, which really allows for a great comprehensive and lively dialogue when we talk about these cross-cutting issues to share U.S. and international experiences on best practices and lessons learned. And in addition to international members and U.S. members, EEI also works with hundreds of industry suppliers and related organizations as associate members. And so I wanted to give you all a greater, depth of information about the international programs and how we work with our members. So the international programs provides a flexible platform for industry collaboration, dialogue, and thought leadership. We work with our members on the CEO-level dialogues and strategic issues. We also support them in outreach and provide them with advisory support, connecting them to in-house EEI expertise, as well as connecting them with other industry leaders around the world. We also work with our members to promote their success stories and their innovations. And lastly, we work with our members on global analysis and trends in the energy industry and provide them with that data and information. And I also wanted to share with you some of our upcoming webinars in case you're interested in participating in those. We have a webinar coming up tomorrow on October 18th, and that's about applying digital 3D virtual spatial world technologies for smarter utility asset management for disaster resilience and response. And we also have a webinar coming up next Thursday on October 26th, and that's on European perspectives for the utility of the future. So if you have any questions about registering for those webinars, please email international@eei.org. All right, and so during this webinar, you will hear from three leading experts from the Edison Electric Institute on how EEI is supporting and working with members on unmanned aircraft systems. And you'll listen to the U.S. legislative and regulatory landscape for drone use, as well as the applications for drones as we look ahead into the future. And you will also have the opportunity to hear from two special guest presenters from Jamaica Public Service, who will share with you more of an international perspective of drone applications and use. And so without further ado, it is my pleasure to introduce Randy Graham, Manager of Business Continuity, Chris Hickling, who is Director of Government Relations, and Mike Mendes, who is Senior Manager of Business Continuity at the Edison Electric Institute.
Thanks, Jess. This is Randy Graham, Manager of Business Continuity at EEI. We are going to go to the agenda for today's presentation. You already heard the introduction. We'll be talking about the Unmanned Aircraft Systems Group at Workroom, the Aircraft Systems Executive Task Force, some utility facts, U.S. legislative and regulatory updates. a Sharper Utility Consortium that we put together, UAS data and information sharing, and then special guest Jamaica Public Service, talk about the international update. So going forward, I'm going to show you a quick video created by EEI Communications. This and other videos are available in the EEI UAS workroom, which I will introduce soon. So that was our introduction to UAS. So EEI member companies were interested in UAS technology and requested an arena to discuss and share information with other members. So we stood up the EEI UAS group. It was formed in 2015 from interest in UAS capabilities. We have 57 member companies represented, which is the majority of our member companies. We are active, and our member companies are active in Visual Line of Sight, VLOS, and we're all waiting for Beyond Visual Line of Sight to be approved. We held our first in-person meeting in April of 2017. One of the most effective ways EEI and its members share information is through our EEI issue workrooms. We created a workroom based on our UAS issue. It is a repository of UAS information, colleagues in the industry, and where we send out regular email blasts with important industry information, articles, and legislation. This is the homepage of the EEI UAS workroom. Joining is easy and only takes a minute. If you are interested, please send me an email at rgraham@eei.org. Once again, the workrooms are only open to EEI members. An outcome of the EEI UAS group is the EEI UAS Executive Task Force. It is chaired by FPL, one of our larger member companies. It was formed in May of 2016. We have 26 member companies represented. It was established as the industry forum for senior-level shareholder-owned electric company executives to influence UAS public policy and to advise on both technical and strategic issues affecting EEI's membership. We held our first in-person meeting last December, and our second in-person meeting will be this December. Here is a high-level overview of our infrastructure. We need technological ways, such as UAS, to inspect it safely and regularly. We have over 5,000 generating units at over 2,000 plants. We have roughly 45,000 substations. We have 382,000 miles of transmission line, and over almost 3.5 million miles of distribution line. Here is an infographic showing the investment in our infrastructure and the reason we need UAS to help keep it running safely. We have 70+ million smart meters installed. We have invested $32 billion in the distribution grid in 2016, and we have two-way digital grid. Digital grid enables two-way meters to power and flow information. UAS help keep our communities running and are instrumental in our current and future smart communities. Smart communities use data and technology to help drive efficiencies, improve sustainability, spur economic development, and enhance quality of life. Here are some key applications for UAS: transmission and distribution inspections, generation facilities inspection, environmental assessment, emergency response and disaster recovery, and monitoring physical security. Characteristics for UAS: they create a higher level of safety, the versatility to go most anywhere, the efficiency of inspections is greater, frequency of inspections is greater, and data is collected more timely and accurately. UAS are becoming integral in emergency response and service restoration. The recent hurricanes proved the use of UAS to be effective for damage assessment and making repairs quicker than the traditional helicopters and lineman climbing process poles. Here are examples of social media sent out by member companies. This one's from Duke Energy and one from FPL showing that drones kind of helped repair restoration quicker than normal traditional ways. Here are some quick stats we collected from a few EEI member companies based on their use of UAS in the recent hurricanes. Member companies were challenged by 51 inches of water. Crew access was one of the biggest challenges. Temporary flight restrictions from the FAA allowed only first responders to fly and not utilities. 18 U.S. teams deployed during Harvey. UAS teams deployed during Harvey, I apologize. Over 500 flights were flown. 20 certificates of authorization were issued for drones, and they were mostly used for asset, with crew movements due to access issues caused by flooding, substation monitoring, energy grid assessment, and we had social media and public awareness communications. During Irma, we had 65 UAS teams deployed in Florida, over 500 flights flown, 54 certificates of authorization issued, 11 were for beyond visual line of sight, which was a newly approved fundamental of drones. Drones were mostly used for transmission and distribution assessments. Social media and public awareness also communicate. Now, here's a short video of CenterPoint Energy in Texas and their use of UAS to inspect damaged infrastructure. There is no sound. Next, we have a detailed tower inspection after the recent hurricanes in Texas. This mission was flown by Sharper Shape, an EEI partner at CenterPoint. Also, there's no sound for this as well, but it will show you the detail the drone can achieve with. EEI Communications helps to communicate the safe use of UAS on social media and flyers. These flyers here can be found in our EEI UAS workroom along with the videos you've just seen. These can be distributed to give public awareness of the safe use of UAS. Visual Line of Sight, VLOS, is currently approved for our members under the current Federal Aviation Administration's Part 107 regulation. We are working with the FAA to show beyond visual line of sight, BVLOS, is safe and effective, and until it is approved, we are utilizing VLOS for inspections and storm recovery efforts. We're holding monthly UAS group calls, special topic calls such as security, technology, and use cases. We have executive task force meetings. We have a meeting with the FAA coming up, Federal Aviation Administration, and we're involving EEI International members. I now turn the presentation over to my colleague, Chris Hickling, Director of Government Relations here at EEI, to go over UAS legislation and regulation in the U.S.
Thank you, everyone. Great to be here this morning. I saw our list has a lot of our domestic members, and so it will be a nice refresher for you guys. And for the international members, we certainly want to give you a sense of how drones are regulated here and maybe how that might differ with how it's regulated abroad. So definitely send those questions in through the chat. This is a slide I like to do just to give folks a sense that we really are still in a Wright brothers moment when it comes to drones. We have only, since 2012, had the legislative authority to fly commercial drones. Before that, it was illegal. So we've gone from no drones at all from the Wright brothers until now, and then in September 2014 we had our first Section 333 permits, and I'll get to what those are in just a minute. We are currently working under an FAA extension, and I need to update that slide because we're now into December until we have to pass that. So we'll get that updated for the final deck. So the way that we've approached things in terms of a regulatory space here in America is basically we've gone crawl, walk, run. So the first thing out of the gate was this thing called a Section 333 exemption, and so these were companies, this map is EEI member companies who took advantage of that process. It was helpful in that it did help get companies interested in commercial use of drones, but it was a little clunky in that it was sort of a case-by-case exemption. You were locked into one kind of drone for one kind of use. But what I like about this slide in particular is you'll see, if you know our companies, we have big electric companies, we have smaller companies, we have both coasts, we have the middle of the country, and so it really shows this is not a technology that's just for one geographical place or one type of company. It really is, we see use cases all over the place. So that was our crawl. We then moved to where we are today, which is walking. So in 2016, they put in place what's called Part 107, and basically you have the limitations in front of you, but if you follow these handful of bullets, again, staying within the visual line of sight, you have to be able to see the drone, daylight only, and with airspace authorization. You can go ahead and fly as long as you have your certificates and all those registration and all those sorts of things. So this has been particularly nice because now you can plug and play whatever technology you want, and again, if you follow these rules, you are cleared for takeoff. But as you'll see, it does have some particular limitations that really make the effectiveness of the technology a little bit less than we'd like it to be. We'd like to go beyond line of sight. We'd like to certainly think about nighttime flying. Those sorts of things, again, you see on the slide, those can be waived, and we'll get to why that waiver authority is important in just a second. So that's where we were, where we are, where we're going. Randy mentioned Sharper Shape. We worked with a number of EEI member companies in Sharper Shape, and they were an interesting company for us because they did this same kind of beyond visual line of sight utility inspection in Europe. We put together a waiver. We asked for those restrictions, that line of sight restriction in Part 107 to be waived, and we had two waivers that we followed the first day that Part 107 rule was effective. So I'll particularly call your attention to these site-specific waivers. So we had half dozen companies, and they said, I want to fly this stretch of line in a suburban, non-congested area, and with pretty good safety technology in terms of redundant computers and radio links and all those sorts of things. And it was actually at a lower altitude and a lower speed than what is the limitation under Part 107. So a lot of safety built into that. Unfortunately, and we are not alone in this as an industry, FAA has not been approving that many beyond visual line of sight requests. So this is in front of FAA, and we certainly hope that it gets approved one day soon. There's companies, and again, I like about this slide that we really do have a good diversity in terms of our member companies who are participating. So here are the waivers, and FAA has done a good job of really speeding up the ones that are pretty straightforward. So we have had some companies that have applied for and received Part 107 waivers for things like nighttime operations. So they've really picked up the pace. This is an inelegant way to fly drones, but it is a process that's in place now. If people really do want to push the technology, they have an opportunity to do that. But you'll see that 20% of the waiver of the waiver requests that are out there are for beyond visual line of sight operations, that third bar down. So there's a huge amount of demand from people in this industry to fly that way. And again, the approvals just aren't quite there yet. I'll mention this for the good of the order. I mentioned that we're working under a stopgap legislative environment right now. But one issue that we're looking at, and there's a little bit of breaking news on this, is there's been an effort here in D.C. and out in the states and localities to have sort of more cooks in the kitchen when it comes to who's regulating drones. So right now we have a national airspace. FAA is our only regulator, and I think most of our companies like it that way. So what we're seeing is that there have been some ordinances passed that restrict the time and the manner of drone operations. And this bill from Senator Feinstein from California and Senator Lee from Utah would actually give the authority to state and localities to do their own, what they call reasonable restrictions on the time, manner, and place of operations for drones. We're quite concerned that this could create a real patchwork of regulations. Any of our member companies could attest to the amount of boundaries that they cross in a given day for a given inspection in terms of different city, county, and even multi-state boundaries. And so if you have to look at every single boundary that you're crossing, that's certainly going to limit the effectiveness, especially as we're considering going from beyond line of sight for long-distance inspections. We want to make sure we have one framework to work under. So certainly something that we're watching. The breaking news is that we expect the White House to put out through an executive order a pilot program that would put some of these, it would sort of test out this theory of having a little bit of state and local control over drone operations. So I think it's beneficial in that, what we have here on the slide from the senators would put in place a permanent process. That authority would be completely, taken away from what has always been a homogeneous regulatory environment. This would at least kick the tires, see what works, see what doesn't work, and it would still have the FAA in the driver's seat in terms of what restrictions are sort of over the line and impede drones. So more to watch there. Randy mentioned the workroom. Certainly, as we get more information, we'll send it out through that workroom. So join today. I mentioned crawl, walk, run. This is an FAA slide, and it is where they see things moving forward. So we've already covered Section 333. We've already covered Part 107. The next three circles in that little nesting doll are where FAA sees themselves going forward. So operations over people is a good example. Right now, you cannot fly a drone commercially if you're flying over people that are not involved in the operation. That obviously limits where you can go and what you can do, and so that's sort of the next thing that they see happening. And then eventually, FAA really does see a future where drones are flying in an integrated way with manned aircraft as well. So they have the plans in place, and this is actually a field where more regulation, I think, would actually help business. That's not necessarily always where a lot of business folks come down in terms of how business can get moving. So I mentioned that is the next step in the process. We do anticipate a rulemaking coming out soon, probably Q1 of 2018. So again, more information will come on that, and we'll want to make sure that this new rule helps move us forward in terms of how electric companies want to use drones. And then again, those sort of expanded rules, expanded operations, that's sort of been pushed back, but we do anticipate after that after flights over people, this will be the next rulemaking up, and we do think it will address beyond line of sight, nighttime use. It says multiple drones. If you watch the Super Bowl halftime show, they had hundreds of drones all flying around Lady Gaga. I don't know how much our companies want to do that, but it would allow us to not hang out with Lady Gaga, to fly multiple drones. So we will. That's another thing that we expect the regulatory environment to be much clearer moving forward. And with that, I think that's the end of my presentation, and look forward to your questions if you have any. And with that, we're going to go over to Mike Menges, and he's going to talk about data sharing.
Thank you, everybody. Mike Menges with EEI. Just briefly, I want to talk about one of the initiatives EEI has underway with data sharing with drone usage. The slide that you have in front of us is what we believe is our current footprint. And as Chris mentioned before, during the Super Bowl, multiple drones flying over the Super Bowl. And as Randy mentioned before, the utilities are using drones for tower inspections, distribution line inspections, inspecting generators. What this slide is showing is there's multiple use cases for drones out there. So anywhere from private sector, looking at infrastructure, for example, during a flood, the insurance industry has interest in drone footage for flood damage so they can justify claims. State and county are looking to get in the airspace of drone usage for traffic control, identifying what roads are open, what roads are closed. Obviously, utilities have an interest in drones to inspect infrastructure, do damage assessment, as well as telecom industry. What we're looking to do is develop a partnership where utilities, private sector, coordinate with public sector such as state and county and limit the number of potential drones and share data. So what we're seeing on the left is what our current footprint probably looks like with multiple drones up there, multiple certifications of authorization being requested through the FAA. What we're trying to do is partner between public and private sector to limit the number of drones that are up there and share the data. So as the utility, for example, is flying drones to collect damage assessment information, that footage could be potentially shared with state and county agencies that are looking for the same information around what roads to clear, traffic restrictions, access points into flood agencies. So the whole concept here is developing a concept of operation between private and public sector on sharing data, limiting the number of drones potentially in the airspace, which will hopefully free up the certificate of authorizations and allow for easier data sharing between private and public sector with drone footage. Any questions on that? Okay.
So now we'd like to welcome special guest, Jamaica Public Service. Bhutan Tobin is a standards engineer, specialist standards engineer with the Engineering and Standards Department at Jamaica Public Service. With his portfolio, he has overall responsibility for the implementation and utilization of UAVs for inspection of JPS T&D assets. We also have Hugh Hamilton. He's the head of Smart Grid Operations at Jamaica Public Service. He's responsible for the development, standardization, operations, and maintenance of the communication platforms that support teleprotection, SCADA, AMI, distribution, automation, telephony, and other corporate services. Welcome.
Thank you for the introduction. We're happy to be invited to share Jamaica's perspective as it relates to drone usage in the utility space and how we at JPS are utilizing this technology to improve efficiency of our operation. The Jamaica Civil Aviation Authority is the body that is responsible for granting authorization for drone usage in Jamaica. Next slide, please. The current state of affairs with regard to drones in Jamaica is there is a Flight Notification 2015 documentation. This notification gives the guidance on the use of drones for recreational, professional, and commercial users. The number of requests for drone permits dramatically increased in early 2016, prompting changes to restrictions and location of drone use, according to industry practices in the developed world. A number of these permits were issued to local companies for aerial surveys, etc. A large number of these locations either resided in or near restricted or prohibited airspace. As a result, additional restrictions have been put in place to facilitate these requests and maintain a high level of safety to the aviation community. The need to have regulations to govern drone use is apparent, and presently a committee in the Flight Safety Division is in the process of drafting regulations for approval. In November 2015, JPS initiated a drone program focused on reliability improvement through the safe, effective, and efficient operations of unmanned aerial systems for patrols and inspections of the transmission and distribution network. The critical facets of the program that were successfully completed include a quality manual, development of a JPS manual for unmanned aerial system operations. The purpose of this manual is to provide guidance to JPS management and line staff responsible for planning, documenting, and executing an effective ongoing UAV program. We train our JPS transmission distribution staff in aerial patrols, utilizing still images, video, infrared scanning. We also incorporate third-party liability insurance for UAV utilization as part of JPS operations. We obtained full operational license from the Jamaica Civil Aviation Authority. This license or permit was issued on May 31st, 2016 to operate UAVs within line of sight for the following operations: inspection of our distribution lines and facilities, inspection of our transmission lines and facilities, inspection of our substation and power plant facilities, and inspection of our communication towers. Today, we have a UAV fleet of 10 units, ranging flight times of 20 minutes up to 40 minutes, which features include autonomous flight, GPS navigation, and with cameras giving us still images, video, infrared, and zooming capabilities. The picture shows a sample finding along our transmission network where we identify defective cross arms using UAVs. We also use UAVs to capture aerial photos of our substations. You see in the picture our Huntsville substation, our Port Antonio substation, our Spread Tree substation, and our Upper Camp substation. As I mentioned before, some of the capabilities of our cameras with zooming capabilities, and you see from the pictures here where we're able to zoom up to 100 meters. Next. Yeah, we were able to zoom, as I said earlier, up to 100 meters. And to top it all off, we have an enterprise management system. When we capture our images, it's uploaded into our application where we have the platform of viewing all our defects separated from equipment that were captured during our drone patrols. I'm going to turn over to my colleague, Mr. Hugh Emerson, who will explain further on our development. Hugh?
All right. So similarly, our JPAA, I believe, takes a lot of its regulations from your own FAA. And I think we are very interested in the changes that will be taking place in the legislative space. We are very interested in understanding the changes that will be taking place as it relates to flying by night, because our infrared scanning, we would actually prefer to do it during the night, but we currently have a restriction on flying drones at night. We're also interested in beyond line of sight operation, and we are unable to do that at this time. And all the discussions with our own Civil Aviation Authority is basically on the waiting stream to see what the FAA decision will be in regards to that. And a lot of it has to do with the insurance or the potential insurance changes for aviation overall in Jamaica, should we adopt policies that may be thought of as being as being of a higher risk to the aviation space. So I think from our standpoint also, we are looking to introduce newer technologies into the drone space. For example, this year we will start our pilot program for the use of LiDAR, and we will also start a pilot program for image recognition. At this time, when we take our images or photos, someone has to physically go through the images to determine the extent of the damages, and we want to automate that process. So I think that is the things that are on the horizon for us. I heard you spoke earlier about demand disaster response. We have only been able to do simulations, so we have not yet had a natural disaster for us to test the fulsome capabilities that we believe that the drone will provide us in doing such responses. But hopefully, well, not hopefully, well, we don't hope for disasters, right? But in the future, we will be able to demonstrate similarly all of the capabilities that we would have been able to adopt. Thank you.
That brings us to the end of our presentation. Are there any questions?
Thank you, Utan. Thank you, Hugh. I want to invite everyone now to please enter in your questions to the chat function. We have a really amazing opportunity right now to hear the U.S. perspective and the international perspective when it comes to the applications of drones and the current landscape opportunities and challenges. So please use the chat feature, and we can get a conversation going in the next 20 minutes or so about the opportunities of drones for the electric power industry. So to kick things off, I can sort of lead with a question about how drones were used in the power restoration efforts in the U.S. with the recent hurricanes. I think the footage that was shown earlier on was a great representation of how drones can be leveraged with the new technology to get the power up and running a lot quicker and a lot more efficiently. So I wanted to invite the team here to kind of speak to some of the examples of how drones were utilized for both Hurricane Harvey and Irma.
Yeah, thanks, Jess. I think Randy in his slides had a picture from FPL. It was actually from Hurricane Matthew a couple years ago, and I think back then it's fair to say that it was kind of a bit more novel, and you know, we were sort of finding our way through how do we interact with FAA during the storm. And you know, a year or so later, now through the unfortunate series of storms and wildfires and other sorts of things that we've been having, it really has now become a completely integrated sort of turnkey piece to the disaster team. You know, as we're supporting member companies here, we know what the process is now with FAA, and on their end, I know that they've gotten a lot quicker at approving, you know, dropping temporary flight restrictions for our companies that want to use things. I know that's been true in Texas and Florida, and I was in touch with folks out in California for the wildfires, and they've been able to work with FAA too. So honestly, I think that it's, you know, we're certainly developing the playbook, but we see it being a really, as I think Randy used the adjective, integral part of disaster recovery. That's how we see it happening. The other thing that's been really fascinating to see.
I have a question for you. During the disaster flights, are you allowed to, are you required to fly under 400 feet? And if you are required to fly under 400 feet, does that restrict you to the area that you can actually cover in terms of viewing the area or the disaster space?
So I believe that each company has to go to FAA with the particulars of their flights as they'd like to have them. So you're still having to get your clearance through the FAA. So I can't speak specifically. Randy may be able to.
I'm not aware, but I think you still have to go by unless you put in a certificate of authorization to fly above that 400 feet, you still have to follow the 400 feet limit.
We hadn't heard from companies that the altitude limit had been a huge problem so far.
Okay. Okay. Our limit is actually 400 feet, and depending on the camera that we're using, we find that sometimes it can be restrictive to the area that we want to cover. That's how I was
Are you referring to when you're using the zoom camera that's when you want to get above 400 feet so you can get greater reach?
Yes.
Okay.
And I believe the rules here is that it's 400 feet, but also within 400 feet of a structure. So if you're going to look at a tower, you still have some clearance where you can be well above that tower. So that sort of is a bit of a range extender in terms of that functionality. Not just the ground. It's not just the ground, yeah.
Bhutan, this is Randy at EEI. I will send you and Hugh an invitation to the workroom where you can pose that question out to members here, or I can pose it out for you, that question to our workroom. It's where we disseminate information and questions from members to kind of get a discussion going with other members on what they are able to do. So I will send you both invitations this afternoon.
No problem.
Okay, and we have a question coming in for JPS. Are your drones operated by JPS staff? And if so, would you speak a little bit to your training program and the timeline of training your staff to utilize the drones? In other words, do you subcontract your drone operations or do you do it yourselves?
We utilize the drones ourselves. When we initially started our program, we actually partnered with a U.S. company called Edison Solutions that provided our team with training, and then we went through further training to create what we call a trainer-trainer program. The utilization of the drone and the training that they required also had some time requirements. So the flight hours that would provide you or put you in the space to consider yourself a trainer. I don't quite remember what the hours are right now. But basically, after achieving those trainer hours, then those persons would actually become the local trainers. So since those initial training, we have actually been doing the training ourselves, and we always invite our Civil Aviation Authority, the persons who provide us with the license, to be a part of that process. So while there is no requirement from them now, we invite them just to ensure their full participation, and we actually want the aviation space, we actually want the drone space to develop quickly, so we involve them primarily in all the things that we are doing. So basically we actually utilize the drones ourselves, and we do the training at this point in time ourselves.
Okay, thank you very much.
As far as training in the U.S., it depends on...
One last thing. There's a difference between, well, my understanding is that in the U.S., there is a requirement for you to have a pilot license, but we don't have that requirement in Jamaica.
Interesting. Yes, we do have that requirement in the U.S., and as far as training programs, it's individual to our member companies. Some do use third-party vendors. Some of our bigger companies that I know of do have in-house departments and use vendors for backup. So it's kind of a mixed bag as to what is used internal or external. I think what we're trying to do going forward here in the U.S. is come up with some standards that would help our utilities with forming internal departments to be able to have fly their own drones.
Okay, so we have another question coming in on the subject of beyond visual line of sight. It seems like this is a large conversation happening now both in the U.S. and internationally. And so I think it'd be good for the audience to hear a little bit more about the opportunities of beyond visual line of sight, to share both the U.S. perspective of it as well as JPS, you could share your perspective on why you think beyond visual line of sight could be very beneficial for your utility operations.
Yeah, I mean, from the EEI, perspective, our members tell us this really is sort of the game changer. It's very useful now, and we can and are doing a whole lot within visual line of sight. But certainly when you think about the transmission network, I think it's enough to wrap around Jupiter like 12 times. I'll have to check my stats on that. But, you know, when you think about that network especially, it needs a lot of inspection. It's you know, critical to the system, and a huge amount of it is out in the middle of nowhere with cleared right-of-ways. There should be no manned aircraft. There should be no unmanned aircraft. There should be no hot air balloons. There should be no one in the way of those lines. And so when you think about the ability to plug into the computer point A, point B, fly there and back, and collect that data that Randy mentioned, that really can be sort of our game changer in terms of, you know, how we're doing it today versus how we could do it tomorrow, safer, more efficient, and a better use of the data. So we really see it as being, you know, kind of the game changer for technology.
Yeah, well, from the Jamaica perspective, right now we don't have significant capabilities regarding beyond line of sight. So we're not very, from the Jamaica Public Service perspective, we're not very aggressive in that specific area, with the exception of the disaster response. Generally, based on my experiences with disaster, a lot of the times we cannot enter into certain communities after disaster because of land slippage, trees falling, and so on. So the time period to clear the area is normally 2 to 3 days. Now, with the drones, our capability of understanding what is taking place behind that area becomes extremely important for our preparation over the 2 days that it will take to clear the area, so that immediately after the area is cleared and we have access again, we can quickly restore. So beyond line of sight application in that regard is very important to us, but that is right now the only application that we have. Our capabilities to do beyond line of sight is limited. I think it's limited to maybe about a kilometer, I think. From my personal experiences, I kind of consider beyond 500 feet beyond line of sight, because even though you have a visual understanding as to where the drone is, sometimes it's difficult to actually know definitively where it's at relative to somewhere else. So in that regard, beyond line of sight is another idea, but we don't really have the true capabilities to take advantage of it, even if the legislation allowed it.
Okay, thank you very much.
And one thing, this is Randy, one thing I wanted to mention, that with our EEI Sharper Utility Consortium, we had planned that BBLOS would have been approved by this point, and since it is not, we are going to fly tomorrow in Alabama the Beyond Visual Line of Sight flight plans, but we're doing it at a much smaller scale with visual line of sight to test the autonomous flight capabilities of Sharper Shape, who is our vendor. So we're hoping that information will be used to utilize and give information to the FAA that it's much safer and more efficient to fly, and hopefully will help them approve BVLOS based on our data we receive tomorrow as part of the criteria.
Okay, so your intention is to take advantage of the autonomous flight to do the plots rather than someone's operation of the drone beyond the line of sight.
Correct. Tomorrow we will be testing their autonomous flights based on no one directly flying the drone.
Understood. Makes a lot of sense. Yes. Thanks.
Okay, so we have a question coming in for the EEI team here. Do U.S. EEI member utilities generally operate their own drones or engage in subcontracts?
This is Randy. One thing I mentioned earlier, it's kind of a mixed case with our utilities. some of our larger utility companies do use their own drones and their own internal departments to train people to fly their own drones. Some other companies utilize subcontractors, third-party vendors to fly for them. A lot of this UAS is right now in research and development with companies, and once it has been kind of approved internally, they can decide whether or not, you know, purchasing their own drones or having their own internal departments is feasible.
Okay, and similarly, a similar question for JPS. Do Jamaican laws allow you to sell drone services to other companies in Jamaica in order to optimize the cost of drone operations?
Bhutan, are you still on the phone?
Yes, sorry. Hello, could you repeat the question, please?
Yeah, sure, I can repeat it. So do Jamaican laws allow JPS to sell drone services to other companies in Jamaica in order to optimize the cost of the drone operations?
We're not, currently that's not the case, but in the future maybe we might take that route, especially where training is concerned. We have a training division and we actually receive training, so we could sell that services, but for now we do not have that in place for now. But maybe in the future we might look at selling our services as related to training. Not to sell drone itself, but training to train personnel to use drones.
Thanks, Bhutan. And I think we could even speak to now the public-private partnership opportunities when it comes to drone operations and drone use.
At EEI, we are partnering with state and one of our member utilities on developing this concept of operation for usage of drones, and it gets back to the sharing of information for those who have the drones, for those that don't, rather than states, for this example, Pennsylvania, rather than Pennsylvania purchasing their own drone fleet, training their staff, they're utilizing a company that already has the existing resources in exchange the data sharing that goes along with it. So, not sure if others are exploring other JPS, any coordination that you're doing with your local government down there?
Okay, thank you, Mike, for sharing that. And I think as we talk about data and information sharing and sort of how utilities are utilizing the data that these drones are collecting, it might be nice to speak briefly on the implications of having all this data and how the data is being managed and analyzed and also kept secure.
One thing we are definitely trying to manage is the amount of data that is being taken in by these drones. There's just huge amounts of data, and actually going through it once it has been collected is also another issue. Some of our member companies are actually viewing the data as it's being collected to decide whether or not it's useful or not and deleting it before it's actually saved. But then again, a lot of it's still being saved to be analyzed later. That's a big issue here in the United States, is how that, is it secure? How secure is that data that's being collected? And what do you do with it? So kind of stay tuned. We'll be definitely discussing this further, the big data issue. Right now, nothing has been kind of decided as to, the best practices for it. So we'll definitely be working on that and sharing that information as it becomes available.
Thanks, Randy. And JPS, do you have any perspectives to share on sort of the data that you're collecting and how you're leveraging it and analyzing it?
Actually, my last slide, enterprise management, we actually have a platform where we actually upload all the pictures on our photos taken in the field, for our operations team can view it at a later date, and to which equipment there should be targets for removal and replacement. So actually our GIS team is actually looking at that right now, developing that platform. So that's where it relates to the data that we're capturing.
During the license negotiation with our Civil Aviation Authority, this was the privacy issue was one of the things that came up on the table. And while we are required to maintain a data set for a certain period of time, they also identify that if for any reason we have information that would be considered private or can be considered private, or trespass information, because you know as the drone flies, the camera is basically just doing its capture of images and or pictures, that we actually remove and destroy those images.
Okay, thank you, Tom.
This is Randy at EEI. One thing I'd like to mention is we do have our executive task force meeting coming up this December, where we meet with our high-level executives at our companies to talk about these issues. One thing coming from that will be the recent storms we've had and how to share information and use drones more effectively and efficiently during storms and processing the information. So that's just one of the topics that will come out of this meeting that we'll be discussing, and we will definitely share this information through the workroom on information that we discussed at the Executive Task Force meeting. So if you have not joined, I know we do have some domestic members on. For international members, please do send me an email, rgraham@eei.org, and I'll be sure to send you an invitation to join our workroom where you can get up-to-date information.
All right, I think this was a really engaging conversation on the applications of drone use, and there's really an opportunity here to have international perspectives in the conversation and a sharing of information between U.S. companies and international members. And I think Randy did a really great job of outlining these opportunities, and we can send out the information, including the slides and the videos after the call to continue this conversation. So thank you all very much for joining the line. Thank you to Utan and Hugh from JPS and the EEI team here.
Thank you, JPS and Jenny.
All right, thank you, everyone.
Thank you.